Welcome back to another official Narrative Assassin update video with your host, yours truly, Hussein Hill. Great to be back with you guys once again. So, not gonna lie, you guys, did not really know what this update video was going to be about specifically when I first was thinking about it. Not really a whole lot going on in the news. So I decided to basically have this update video, the subject matter of this update video, revolve around the continued mongrelization of this country via anti-white, we'll say, identitarian celebrations. And the reason why this came to, I guess why I came to decide on this particular subject matter was because, one second here. There we go. It was bothering me. Was because of, most notably, the fact that it's Black History Month. And recently we had this Super Bowl halftime show, which everyone's kind of going crazy about. And I want to address those two things separately, but then launch off to a broader conversation about the continued march against white identity in this country, the continued march against American identity in this country. And I want to get into a few different aspects of it. I want to get into the failures of, well, obviously we'll start with the overt anti-white, anti-American identitarian trimmings of what's occurring, as well as what I would say the failings of any meaningful reaction or response from the right wing to address this stuff in a meaningful way. But before we go into that, let's get into logistics real quick before we get into the subject matter of the video. Just finished my my article, and my article is finally published, rather. It's been finished for quite some time, but my article is finally published. It is on America First Initiative Substack. And America First Initiative is a very fledgling, small little group that seeks to sort of aggregate and promote various America First works, content, and get people kind of connected who across the country who are pro-America First, who want to get connected for business or political activism, content, media, etc. So the link for the article of that Substack will be in the description below of this video. And I will be looking to do my own Substack account. Not really looking forward to it, but I will try to do it. But specifically, I really want you guys, well, yes, I will look forward to do it, but I might plan on a Hussein Hill Substack coming to fruition, but there's a small chance that I might not want to do it at all either. So we haven't decided yet, but I'm still on the fence about it. I'm still in negotiations about it, basically. But until further notice, just go over to America First Initiative. Great people over there. Great guy that runs it, America First Initiative, to see the Substack where my article is published, and expect another article this month. I'm working on one and expect it to be out between the end of this month and the beginning of next month. So there's that. And of course, guys, please follow me on all of the platforms below. Follow me on X/Twitter. Follow me on Rumble, YouTube. Follow the Federalist Press, aka the TFP, on X/Twitter and Rumble, and expect TFP videos to be being released soon, one of which will be footage from my most recent speaking event, of which I didn't promote on the channel, because it was relatively small and specifically for YouTube, I guess. My YouTube account is very, very small. I'm trying to grow it, so I didn't really feel the need to do it. It was promoted all over X. It was an inaugural speaking event for an organization that I'm a part of called the Old North Patriots. Old North Patriots is a startup organization that I'm helping to spearhead here in North Carolina to basically focus on North Carolinian issues with an America First and a Christ First and or Christian nationalist, if you will, sort of focused perspective. If you haven't done that, yeah, I'll put that in the description below as well too. In the description below as well too, you'll find the link to Old North Patriots. We'll just start shilling all of it, dude. Old North Patriots as well. And please follow Old North Patriots on X. If you can do that, that'd be great. What else? Yeah, so the speaking event did that. It was actually really nice. It was a really nice speaking event. And it was nice to kind of talk to a normative crowd of people. A lot of normies, a lot of good, down-to-earth, Southern Christian American citizens. It was nice. I enjoyed it. So my only critique about it was me. First and foremost, the speaking event had me as a keynote speaker, as a representative of Old North Patriots, and Hussein Hill, myself, and a one Stephen Horn, who is an investigative journalist and also a colleague of mine here in North Carolina. He does a lot of great work. My only critique about my performance, or my performance, I guess you would call that, at the event, like my presentation, was that I need to get more sleep. I was extremely tired, and you could just tell just by watching the video that I was like running on fumes. I was clinging on to certain words. I was trying to grasp for certain continuations of sentences. So it was a bit rough in that regard. It was a good presentation. It was a good speech, good monologue. I liked it, but definitely needed to get some more sleep. So that's my one critique. I got to stop burning it from both ends. So again, check out Old North Patriots in the description below. I'm going to make sure to put a link to Old North Patriots going forward in the description below as well. And yeah, that's about it. All right, so on to the subject matter of this update video. So as I mentioned before, the subject matter of this update video is going to revolve around a broad topic. And the broad topic, basically, in a nutshell, to put it plainly, is the continued assault on American identity, the continued assault on white American identity. And so we'll start with the Super Bowl halftime show, because the Super Bowl halftime show seems to be the big conversation starter of this week. Truth be told, I didn't watch the full length of either one. I actually opted out of the football Super Bowl because I don't care, if I'm being honest. But I watched enough. I watched enough of the Super Bowl halftime show, and I also watched enough of the TPUSA reaction to the Super Bowl halftime show, which was called the All-American Halftime Show. And I'm going to be honest with you, I hated both of them equally. I know that there are people, Nick Fuentes most notably, who are saying that like the halftime show, the official halftime show, was objectively great, and the TPUSA show was objectively terrible. I would sort of agree. I think they're both terrible equally. You know, I don't like either one of them. I don't particularly care for reggaeton. I don't particularly care for theatrical. I mean, I liked Green Day. That was cool, I guess, but not even really, because it was sort of like them playing songs off of one album. They only play songs off of American Idiot. They never play songs off of anything else, because it's apropos, I guess, now in 2026 and post-Trump America, post-Trump, we'll say Trump's America, post-2016 Trump America, to kind of rattle on about like hating America and like the American Idiot and all these sorts of things. So, personally, it wasn't my cup of tea, but I will say that objectively, the production quality of the halftime show was objectively better than the production quality of the TPUSA All-American halftime show, All-American reactionary show, we're going to call this. It was objectively better than that. Once again, I don't really care for either one of them. I think they're both equally ridiculous. And let's start with the red meat of the conversation, because everybody wants to get to the red meat of the conversation, which is like what the halftime show represents. And we are going to move on to the conversation of like Black History Month and all this. But I mean, what the halftime show basically represented, I don't think it's even ambiguous. It represented a palatable, marketable face on a few things. A enabling or sort of a cheering on of the resistance to ICE. Obviously, this is all happening under the continuous ICE operations, or at least at the very least the continued controversy of ICE operations. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. The continued controversy of ICE operations ongoing in this country. So obviously this was definitely a wink and a nod to that. It was definitely a wink and a nod to, flipping off the idea that America should deport people, that, no person is illegal, all this. I mean, the slogan for the event was like love beats hate or something like that. Love wins over hate. So it was clearly a wink and a nod to the resistance of ICE operations. And it was also, sort of broadly speaking, a way to It was very sophisticated. I will give it that. It was definitely a way to ingratiate the general public with the idea of multiracialism. It was sort of this idea of like, multiracialism is here, multiculturalism is here, so we're not going to be completely adversarial towards you, we're not going to be completely hostile towards you, but make no mistake, multiracialism and multiculturalism is here. And I think the reason why it was easier for that particular halftime show to pull this off was because it was done by Puerto Ricans. It was done by South Americans. And anyone that knows anything about Puerto Rico specifically, but even generally speaking South America, there's a large distribution of European genetics, European ancestry and lineage within South America. So when it comes to South Americans, they're more able to project sort of like a reconciliatory or like a seemingly reconciliatory / assimilatory sort of disposition to the broader white American population, because there's a part of their genetics, there's a part of the lineage that is in fact European. This also kind of explains why for generations Hispanic Americans and Black Americans have had just as much, if not more in some cases, acrimony and friction between one another as white Americans and Black Americans. There is a European distinct genetic ancestry there that separates them from other non-whites, specifically in the American context. So that's clearly the case right there. Clearly, the halftime show was a concession. It was a really well done concession. I'll give it that. It was a very well done concession of trying to meet the public with a non-hostile, non-antisocial, non-aggressive form of like leftism, while still pushing leftism. The TPUSA event, again, didn't watch both these things through. I just watched the highlights of both of them. The TPUSA event was just terrible. It was just fucking terrible. It was completely cringe. It was awful. It was the greatest hits for Gen Xers and millennials, is what it was. It was the greatest hit for Gen Xers, white Gen Xers and white millennials. But it wasn't even explicitly pro-white identitarian either. It really wasn't. It was sort of dog whistling to that with the country and, you know, the appeals to red, white, and blue in America and all this. But it was undoubtedly a cringe fest that was specifically targeted towards Generation X and millennials. And, you know, I want to start with that sort of. Well, no, we'll get to that I guess later. But we'll stick here with this. I want to sit in this for a while, which is the conversation about how completely incompetent the right wing is, how completely incompetent the reactionary right wing is, how completely incompetent the cultural right wing is. There is no overstating how terrible the right wing is at creating art and fighting back against its would-be opposition or its actual opposition. And you know, when the stakes are things like, you know, the replacement of the white majority, the now dwindling white majority, replacement of like Christian or American identity, you should take, this should be cause for concern. This should be definitely cause for concern, but a lot of people on the Republican right, a lot of people on the mainstream sort of like cultural right, they're just fine with this. They're just fine with this terrible demonstration of shallow, two-dimensional patriotism, this hokey nonsense that we're engaging in. It's this paltry attempt at like rebellion or reactionary politics. It's awful. And I will say this again, and it's meaningful, that the halftime show was not as bad. The halftime show was not as bad as, for example, any expression of Black History Month. And you see this a lot too this month as well too. You see a lot of sort of like, again, MAGA, Trump-adjacent content creators, people like John Doyle, for example, many others who are sort of like chipping away at the conversation of Black History Month. And they're going with the usual greatest hits. They're going with the things like Rosa Parks was a paid operative. Everyone knows that. Rosa Parks was a paid left-wing operative. They're going with things like Martin Luther King was a communist rapist. He was a communist sexual degenerate rapist, infiltrator, insurgent to American interests. He was commie scum. We also know this as well. I did a video back before I was subsequently or initially banned off of YouTube, approximately what 2 or 3 years ago. I did a video about this. I was banned off 2 years ago, but I did a video about this like years ago. I did a video about this like in between the years of like 2018, 2020 about Martin Luther King, the real story of Martin Luther King. And yeah, people are going to that conversation now. Like, Martin Luther King is a degenerate, he's a communist, okay, etc., whatever. And people are going to this conversation, even with the highlights, for the exception of the far right, the explicit far right, the explicit racialist far right, everyone's going to the conversation about Black History Month and all these sort of like anti-white insurgencies with this idea of like the culture, these people are playing identity politics, and these identity politics are anti-white, and this is bad because we should live in a society where we judge someone by merit and not by race, and all this. And theoretically that would be the case. I would agree with that theoretically. The problem is, well, twofold. The problem is the other races are not playing that game, number one. And number two, there's a genetic biological component to all of this. The reason why, specifically with Black History Month and Black culture writ large, it's so mongrelized is because of the genetic composition. There's a genetic composition to this to the reality of what it means to be Black and to be of a sub-Saharan extracted ancestry, and of course there's a genetic component to the conversation of Black culture. Jared Taylor, for example, has spoken extensively about this. You can see this when looking at Charles Murray and the bell curve. You can look at this just by just comparative analysis with regards to IQ distributions as it pertains to people of various racial ancestries from continent to continent. The fact of the matter is, race is inextricably linked to things like IQ. Race is inextricably linked to things like civilizational or cultural output. So it necessarily follows that if race is inextricably linked to these particular manifestations of human behavior and human output, etc., it stands to reason that we have to have the conversation on a biological level. When it comes to Black America, here are the facts. The facts of the matter are, and these facts are not exactly necessarily nice. They don't feel good to hear. They clash against, or they rub up against our sort of predisposed or inherent desire to move towards egalitarianism or sort of classical liberalism as like Americans. Americans, we are very egalitarian, and Americans, we are historically very liberal. It's just the case. So this sort of clashes against our inherent liberalism and egalitarianism. And if you're Christians, something similar can be said about that as well. But the facts of the matter are, the ancestry of Black America comes distinctly from sub-Saharan African descent, and these are people that were traded off by fellow sub-Saharan Africans into slavery, and before and or prior to their interaction with the Europeans, these people had no written wheel. They had no written wheel. They had no wheel. They had no written language. They were living in a very primitive, savage disposition. These people were not living in a high society, and of course, you will hear this from a lot of Black nationalists and Black advocates about this. They'll talk about things like Egypt. They'll talk about things like Ethiopia. They'll sort of cite these sort of edge cases or these outliers within Africa to demonstrate this idea of like Black or African civilizational superiority. The fact of the matter is, not only is Egypt, for example, the Egypt that they are referring to, not only are the Egyptians historically not sub-Saharan African, they're a different race. The citations of northern or coastal African civilizations that were on the coast, on the exterior of the continent, are not synonymous with those that are on the interior of the continent. Those that were on the exterior of the continent they interacted with other racial groups. They interacted with other tribes through trade, through commerce, because they were on the coast, obviously. So they had more. They had literal geographical standing to engage with trade and commerce interactions of alien or foreign influence. And again, many of these polities, like in North Africa, are genetically different. They are admixtures. They have Mediterranean blood, they have African blood, they have European blood. These are admixed people, as opposed to people that are in the interior in the sub-Sahara. So That's the reality of it. And the reality is white colonists, European colonialists rather, European slave owners, slave traders, they brought blacks to America and they civilized them. Now, nobody wants to hear that because it's very, very jarring. It sounds very insensitive and it feels bad, but it's the truth. And the other fact of the matter is, specifically with black Americans, the reason why they hold so much resentment, as I mentioned earlier in a previous update video, is because they fundamentally know this reality. They know they didn't found America, they didn't settle America, they didn't develop the English language. They also know that every single cultural totem and every single cultural artifact that they have it was influenced and was inherited from it was an iteration of the Anglo and or European, Northern Western European ancestry of this country. And they know this. And so this creates resentment, this creates disdain, and this creates this unwavering, ongoing march of anti-white sentiment within the black community. Now, again, like I said before, too, going back to the halftime show, with discussion of South Americans are a little different. South Americans are, again, they're an admixture. They are literally they're a group of people. They're like a large diaspora of people, rather, who are mixed race. They are a mixture of races. Basically, you're essentially European blood and what you would call like the native blood of particular geographical natives to the continent before the settling. That's what they are. So they're kind of like half-breeds. They're basically like they're a diaspora of mulattoes, if you will. They're a diaspora of half-breeds. And so their approach to the conversation is slightly different because they have an actual genetic and familial connection with Europe. I mean, Spanish is a European dialect. It's kind of funny watching a lot of the chuds go off about, they're speaking Spanish in America. It's like, well, I understand that that's foreign to America, sort of. You can make that argument, even though, like, the conquistadores, there were a lot of, like, Spanish settlers that helped forge America, whatever. So that's not even necessarily true at all, but I guess, like, in the contemporary sense, you can say that. But if you're using, like, a white nationalist or a pro-white lens, Spanish is a European language. So, like, on the face of it, you're just kind of being ridiculous. Like, you know, like in a terrible argument, like, they're not speaking English. It's like, well, English is just one of the many dialects from the continent of Europe. Like Spanish is a European dialect. French is a European dialect. You know, these are all European languages from the continent of Europe. So it's kind of funny there. But again, you will see the expressions of sort of the South American anti-whiteism. It's muddled. It's different because there is a sort of complexity there. But needless to say, this is a point that I will say. Regardless of how subtle or non-subtle it is, or explicit rather, there's a culmination of all these things happening. There's absolute culmination. The things like the Super Bowl halftime show, things like this, you know, Black History Month, and all these sorts of like anti-white, non-white sort of like identifier-based, identity-based sort of celebrations of what have you, whatever. These things are culminating together into one cohesive march forward for the continued promulgation of white genocide. That's what it is. And it must be also brought up that the right wing has no answer to this. We have literally no answer to this. Again, you know, things like the All-American Halftime Show, which is brought to you by Zionist Inc., aka TPUSA, an organization that gets billions of dollars from Israel, an organization that can't even really pick a lane. Like 1 minute it's nativistic and it's immigration restrictionist, and the next minute it's pandering to homosexuals and transsexuals and classical liberals. Like, it doesn't even know what it stands for. I mean, it's trying to pander to traditional Christianity while a woman runs the organization, which is anything but traditional. You know, this sort of Hulk Hogan, you know, like the worst aspects of the 80s, the worst aspect of the 90s, rehashed nonsense. It's insufficient. It's completely insufficient, and it's fucking cringe. Like, it's just to observe it is just sad and pathetic and embarrassing. And you know, I think that's the part that I really want to kind of focus on as well too in this update video, in this discussion, is we need to think about novel ideas, because at this point, the liberal consensus is codified. The liberal world order is codified. There is no escaping liberalism right now. All of us exist in it. All of us benefit from it in many ways, whether we like to admit it or not. And all of us, in some way or another, enjoy it. We can sit there on Twitter. People can go on Twitter and X and talk about like, oh, I hate liberalism. I hate the anti-whiteism. Yeah, but you're still going to watch the shows that you watch. You're still going to buy the products that you buy. You're still going to engage with the broader liberal order. You're still going to go watch a movie. You know, if a blockbuster film comes out that was made by a liberal or a leftist, you're still going to spend, like, you're still going to shell the money to go see that feature. So I think the first part really is having the conversation about how can the right wing fight against this? How can we fight against this? Because for a while, you know, I would say things like, which I do believe, I would say things like we have to abolish things like, you know, South American, you know, month or whatever, you know, Mexican Heritage Month or Black History Month, which I still fundamentally believe that these months and these celebrations are ridiculous. I do believe that this sort of like sub-racial celebration of minorities in particular needs to end. But it's like, shall we fill it with? What is going to be the filler? Is it going to be like empty country music? Is it going to be neoconservatism wrapped up in like faux nativism? Is it going to be Zionism? What exactly? Or is it going to be this like resentful, ugly white nationalism? You know, because like, for example, it seems to be the case that all we have now to pick from is TPUSA or Blood Tribe. It's like, so we can either pick Kid Rock and you know, shitty country musicians that no one's ever heard of or no one cares about, MAGA adjacent country music stars, basically like a slightly edgier version of just like what was happening under Bush, during the Iraq War, you know, this sort of like stars and bars. We gotta fight against the Muslims and the invaders, cause freedom isn't free, you know, like straight up like Team America. Freedom isn't free. It calls folks like you and me. like literally, like the things like the TPUSA All-American Halftime Show, they were ripped straight out of the pages of the script of like satire of the likes of like Team America. So like shit like that, either it's like cringy, shitty, neoliberal garbage, or like Handsome Truth with guys with like face tattoos, waving swastikas, with not even good oi, not even like RAC, you're not even talking about like Rockorama Records for all the esoteric guys out there, not even Rockorama Records, not even like Skullhead, No Remorse, Fortress, Kill Baby Kill, none of the hits of the white power pro-white skinhead scene. No, we're gonna get like shitty like metalcore, like shitty Ozfest fucking metalcore. It's embarrassing. This is what we have to offer for the broader right wing, and it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I will say that one of the conversations in tandem that have to be happening, while the right wing has to figure out what the hell it is going to fight for, how it's going to present itself, I would say it needs to be more progressive. And I do mean that descriptively, and I do mean that aesthetically and musically and artistically. We need to engage with progressivism, like as a philosophy. We can't be in this stodgy, this plastic patriotism, this two-dimensional nativism, this two-dimensional white nationalism. All this is not going to be sufficient, because people ask me all the time, and I reiterate this all the time in my videos, who's saying, why are you so obsessed or why are you so preoccupied with pro-white politics or pro-white advocacy? And I had said before, besides the fact that I am a mixed race and I have a genetic ancestral tie to this conversation, besides that fact alone, it is the core of my country. White identity, white people's European identity is the core of America. I speak the language. I wear the clothes. I wear the fashion. I engage in the existential cultural trimmings of otherwise Northern Western European culture. And so if I want this to continue, I have to promulgate and advocate on behalf of that. And so in the spirit of that, that is why I have a preoccupation of this conversation. But beyond that, because I've also said before too, in many ways, I'm pro-black, because I'm not against my ancestry. I'm pro-white in so much I am part white, and I'm pro-black in so much I am pro-black. And when it comes to blacks, when it comes to being pro-black, I've said before and I'll say it again, I want to see Black America thrive, However, Black America has to realize that its preservation and its promulgation and survival is inextricably linked to the survival and the success of white America. Black America will never succeed without white America. It will never. This, by the way, applies to all non-whites in this country. Generally speaking, you can make some obvious exceptions, like East Asians, for example, Jews. I think those two polities specifically they would be fine with or without whites, which I'm not happy about that being the case. But they're sort of a self-sustainable group of people, or rather groups of people. But with regards to Black America, if we are to believe, which I think is sound, that Black America has a long history, has a long heritage, or rather a long heritage or a claim to this land, in so much as that Black Americans have been on this continent for roughly 400 years, right? If that is to be the case, which I do believe, then they have to understand that they have to make peace with how they came to this continent, and they have to make peace with how they came to be, the culture that they love came to be. It didn't come from tribal Africa. It didn't come from them. As a matter of fact, when Black Americans tried to splinter off after the 1970s and 1960s/1970s cultural revolutions that created this sort of like this idea of like trying to create these parallel culture, when Black Americans tried to indulge in their own parallel culture, they started to decline. When blacks became less assimilatory and more racially aware, they became worse. Blacks were doing better when they were subordinated to white standards. That's the reality. And once they started to reject white standards, they got worse. So again, this is the reality that Black people have to come to terms with. This is the reality that all Americans have to come to terms with. So, for the white liberals that don't want to hear this because it makes them, they know it's true and it makes them feel guilty, you need to get over it. And for the Black people out there, the majority of you are not going to listen to this. The majority of you will see this video and you'll be like, oh, he's a well-spoken, bitch ass, Uncle Tom ass nigga. It's like, okay, well, you're retarded. You are retarded. You're not intelligent. And instead of like facing and contending with the fact of your existence, your biological reality, your historical reality, your reality as it pertains to you being an American citizen, you'd rather retreat into this sort of like emotive-based, reflexive, defense mechanism or defensive positioning rather, or posturing to offset the reality of your own failures, of your own shortcomings. And that's a problem. So, for the vast majority of Black Americans will hear this and they'll be annoyed and they will dismiss it as Uncle Tomery. And to the extent that that's even a viable slur, I wear that as a badge. I wear being an Uncle Tom as a badge. Proud Uncle Tom, proud ally of the white colonist, white supremacist, proud ally of white colonialism, white supremacy, white authority, white and pro subordination, the subordination of all non-whites to white identity. 100% I'm on board with that. Call me Uncle Tom. I wear that with a badge of honor. But, in all seriousness, for the non-whites and or blacks viewing this who are intelligent, this is something that you have to come to terms with as well, too, because a lot of them don't want to come to terms with this. A lot of the very intelligent blacks who understand there's an issue, and I'm not saying embrace self-hatred, because I've seen that happen before, and it's gross. Self-hatred is disgusting. I'm not saying embrace self-hatred. But you have to embrace the reality of race. This is not a cultural issue. This is not an educational issue. This is a racial and biological issue. And you have to embrace that reality as such. And if it's not embraced, if this conversation is not embraced thoroughly, people will engage in self-hatred. And how would you blame them? With the criminal statistics as they are, with the rate of, the rate of single motherhood, the rate of drug addiction, the rate of domestic violence, look at, literally Black America is engaging in all the deadly sins. Like, vanity, gluttony, wrath, lust, envy. All the sins. Pride, right? All the sins, all the carnal sins. Black America is engaging in. All of them. And so, if you look at it, why would you be proud of that? It makes perfect sense to be anti-black, actually. Logically, if you look at black culture, it makes perfect sense to be anti-black. It makes perfect sense for a black person to grow up in their culture and be like kind of self-loathing. But we shouldn't give into self-loathing because that's evil. So again, in order for this to be really contended with, black Americans of all stripes, intelligent black Americans of all stripes need to wake up and make peace with the biological reality of the conversation. There needs to be a complete understanding of the necessity for white identity and white identitarianism to be preserved and to be promulgated and be revered and deferred to if America is to persist. And that really should broadly be applied to all non-whites, even South Americans, for example. Same conversation. South Americans need to show subordination to European identity because, literally, by definition, the modern South American identity would not exist without European identity. You are a product of colonization, or colonialism, rather. You are a product of the colonizers, the colonialists, literally mating with the indigenous population and giving birth to you. And with regards to the right wing, we have to be more dynamic. I've toyed around with things, ideas like having a American History Month, and in that American History Month, all of it can be shown, right? You can have people basically, as long as you don't. I think the law, I guess the federal, it'd be a federal holiday, and the federal holiday would stipulate something to the effect as long as you're not desecrating during this month, as long as you're not doing anything that desecrates or undermines the legitimacy or the reverence for America, then all is well. You can talk about Black American history, Hispanic American history, whatever people want to do, but the mainstream view of this potential, if there were to be something like this potential, would have to focus on the white identity of it. It would have to focus on the white identitarian trimmings of it. But that's just one idea among many. I mean, at the end of the day, even that seems kind of cringe. Like American History Month. It's like American History Month. It's like, it sounds nice, but it also sounds very contrived. And this is something that I think that we on the right have to really take seriously. We have to transcend this sort of Americana cringe nonsense. I mean, it's always good, on the 4th of July, go for it. It's always good once in a while to go for it. You want to put on a camel hat, whatever. I like to do it sometimes too. But that can't be all we have to offer. We can't just have to offer camo hats and American flags all the time and red, white, and blue and stars and bars and all this. We need something more dynamic. We need something more interesting and more fleshed out. So that's pretty much my summation on that particular conversation. And that would be my prescription. That would be my sort of analysis on all of that. And again, I would say that as it currently stands, I would like to see the abolition of Black History Month. I'd like to see the abolition of Hispanic Heritage Month. I like to see the abolition of all these particular identitarian months. I would. But in order for that to occur, to my dear right-wingers, to my dear pro-white advocates, white identitarians, the white identitarians that are not ridiculous, who don't see someone like me, a mixed-race or non-white individual, have these conversations and freak out. For the non-ridiculous, the non-idiotic, retarded elements of the white nationalists, whatever's left of that, because I think really that whole movement is cooked. For anyone on the right wing who's truly concerned with this conversation, truly concerned with making a change, we need to replace all of that crap with something else. It needs to be progressive. It needs to be visionary. It needs to be multifaceted. And it needs to be elite. So with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.